To a story now out of Myrtle Beach that has grabbed the attention of the nation. The estranged wife of a pastor was found dead in North Carolina last month. Questions about how 30-year-old Mica Miller died came up after her husband, John Paul, announced her death during the end of his sermon on April 28th. He's a minister. Just a day after her body was found and 2 days after he was served divorce papers. In court documents filed yesterday, Mica's family alleged that she feared her husband may do something to her. In an update today, Robeson County deputies said that she died by suicide. They say they have evidence, including a 911 call, to support that decision.
What happens when the one place meant to be a refuge becomes a prison? When the shepherd of flock may also be the wolf in disguise? What happens when a pastor's pulpit hides his darkest sins? When the woman meant to be cherished becomes a warning voice ignored by everyone around her? Tonight, on Silent Witness, we unravel a chilling story of betrayal, cover-ups, and control. The case of Mica Miller, a pastor's wife who died under suspicious circumstances, has left questions the church does not want to answer. Fire before we dive in, let me ask you, do you believe churches should expose abusive leaders publicly or deal with them quietly? Drop your thoughts in the comments.
Please note that all related materials referenced in this video were majorly sourced from either official court or police documents, reference statements, or other reputable sources, weeding out the speculation theories and unverified information. Want to support us and appreciate our craft? Click like, comment, and hit the subscribe button now.
Solid Rock Church, Myrtle Beach, South Carolina was founded in the 1990s. Solid Rock started as a small congregation with big ambitions. Over the years, it became known for energetic worship services, powerful preaching, and an emphasis on community outreach. It wasn't the biggest church in South Carolina, but it was deeply woven into the fabric of its neighborhood, running food drives, youth programs, and even mission trips overseas. For many, it was more than a church. It was home, and like many homes, people trusted the leaders inside to guide them spiritually, morally, and personally. But what happens when the leader himself becomes a storm inside the house of God? John Paul J.P. Miller was charismatic, funny, and deeply convincing in the pulpit. He spoke with the authority of a man who knew Scripture well, and to the congregation of Solid Rock Church, he seemed anointed for greatness. To many, he was a rising star of Solid Rock. He connected with youth, spoke with passion, and seemed to embody the church's bold spirit. Behind him was his wife, Allison, the quiet yet steadfast partner raising their children. To the outside world, they were the picture of a strong Christian marriage, a pastor and his wife leading by example. But, as we've seen so many times in stories like this, the image did not match the reality. JP's charm on stage did not always translate at home. Those who knew the couple privately whispered about his temper, controlling behavior, and questionable boundaries. Allison bore it silently, because who could she turn to? The man she struggled with behind closed doors was the same man her congregation adored every Sunday morning. And Solid Rock had invested in his image. He was young, bold, magnetic. He drew people in, and churches love leaders who can fill seats. The cracks became impossible to ignore in 2015. That year, Allison discovered something that would shatter her marriage and expose JP's double life. Her husband, the pastor, was caught in a compromising situation with someone far younger, someone they both knew well, Mica. Mica Miller was just a young girl searching for belonging, purpose, and God. She grew up in a family that valued faith. Her parents instilled in her the idea that church was a place of refuge, a sanctuary from the chaos of the outside world. But like many families, they also longed for a church where they could not only attend but belong. That search led them to Solid Rock Church in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. It was the mid-2000s. Solid Rock was in its prime, thriving with programs for youth, women, and families. And the man who stood out in that environment was none other than John Paul J.P. Miller. At the time, J.P. wasn't a senior pastor yet. He was working primarily with the youth, building programs that energized teenagers and drew them deeper into church activities. His humor, his bold preaching style, and his ability to connect made him magnetic. Parents trusted him. teens admired him. And into that environment walked Mica, just 14 years old. The Miller family quickly became part of the Solid Rock community. Mica, bright and creative, threw herself into church life. She joined the worship team, volunteered with media, and was often seen serving wherever help was needed. She wasn't just a pew warmer. She was deeply involved. And that was what made her stand out. By her late teens, she wasn't just another young woman in the church. She was known, liked, and trusted. But it also meant she spent a lot of time around J.P. Miller. Harmless. He was her youth pastor, her mentor, someone her parents and the church trusted. But little by little, that line between pastor and friend blurred. And then it blurred even further. When Mica turned 18, J.P. played a role in her first major life decision, marriage. In fact, he was the one who officiated her wedding to a young man named Jeremy, who was also part of Solid Rock Church. It seemed like a fairy tale beginning. Two young people serving God together, supported by their church family. Jeremy ran the sports ministry. Mica served in media and worship. They were part of the church's heartbeat. But behind the scenes, trouble was brewing. Mica began working more closely with J.P., not just in ministry, but also as a secretary and a babysitter for his children. That meant long hours in his office, private conversations, and blurred boundaries. By 2015, whispers began circulating. And when Allison, J.P.'s wife at the time, discovered the truth, that her husband was romantically involved with Mica, it shattered not one, but two marriages. Mica and Jeremy divorced. Allison and J.P. divorced. The church, instead of calling out the sin, absorbed it. At the time, Mica was barely in her 20s, and the affair rocked the church. To Allison, she was like extended family. To J.P., however, she had become much more. The revelation broke Allison's world apart. Her husband wasn't just unfaithful. He was unfaithful with the young woman they had welcomed into their lives. What would you have done if you were Allison? Spoken out to the whole church, or kept it quiet for the sake of appearances? Drop your thoughts in the comments. The scandal quickly reached the congregation. For many members of Solid Rock, it was a gut punch. Their youth pastor, the man trusted to guide teenagers, was now exposed to betraying not only his wife, but also his calling. The fallout was swift for Allison. She filed for divorce. Her children's lives were turned upside down. The family was broken. But for J.P., the story took a very different turn. Here is where Solid Rock Church faced a crossroads: hold J.P. accountable or protect their own image. The church chose image. Rather than removing J.P. from ministry, the church minimized the scandal. It was framed not as disqualification, but as a trial, something to be forgiven and moved past. Some members left in disgust, unwilling to sit under the leadership of a man so compromised. But many stayed, convinced that grace meant keeping him in power rather than holding him accountable. And just like that, J.P. remained in leadership. The message to Allison was clear. Your voice doesn't matter here. The message to the congregation was chilling. The pastor could weather scandal and remain untouchable. To those watching from the pews, it sent a dangerous message. Not only could J.P. remain in power, but the woman at the center of the scandal would now stand beside him on stage, leading worship, directing ministries, and smiling as if nothing had happened. For some, it was a story of redemption. For others, it was proof that Solid Rock had chosen image over integrity. Do you think a pastor who commits adultery should ever be restored to leadership? Type yes if you believe in restoration, or no if you think the pulpit should be off limits forever. This isn't just about the collapse of one marriage. It's about the culture of silence that allowed a man like J.P. to keep rising higher, even as the foundations beneath him rotted. Forgiveness is biblical, but forgiveness does not erase consequences. Forgiveness does not mean re-enthroning a fallen leader. And yet, Solid Rock's choice to protect its reputation instead of addressing sin set the stage for the tragedy that would follow. As Allison faded into the background, Mica stepped forward into the spotlight. What seemed like a dream role, pastor's wife, worship leader, community face, was about to become a nightmare she could not escape. If someone you loved confided something like that to you, what would you do? Call the police? Confront their partner? Or pray and hope it wasn't true? Share your thoughts in the comments. Shockingly, at just 23, Mica became the first lady of Solid Rock Church. Suddenly, the babysitter, former secretary, became a pastor's wife. She went from sitting in the pews to standing in front of the congregation, leading worship, designing graphics, overseeing ministries, even traveling overseas on mission trips to Kenya. To the outside world, she seemed radiant, a gifted singer, a creative spirit, a pastor's wife stepping into her calling. But those closest to her knew that not everything was as it appeared. Friends noticed her quietness around JP. They saw how quickly she deferred to him, how she often looked anxious rather than confident. And as years passed, her private writings and later her social media posts revealed a woman struggling deeply, trying to reconcile her faith with the reality of her marriage. Even before the public unraveling of their relationship, Mica dropped hints of pain in conversations with her sister Sierra. She admitted that she often felt trapped. She spoke about wanting to leave, only to be pulled back in, sometimes with promises, sometimes with fear, sometimes with pressure from religious expectations. One of her most haunting statements came just weeks before her death. She told Sierra, "If I ever end up with a bullet in my head, it wasn't me, it was JP." Those words echo like a chilling prophecy. So who was Mica really? She was not just a pastor's wife. She was a creative, a singer, a dreamer, someone who longed to use her gifts for God. She was a young woman who trusted the wrong person at the wrong time, and whose vulnerability was taken advantage of by someone in power. Her story is a reminder that not all who stand on stage with a microphone are free. Sometimes they are carrying chains invisible to the congregation. For Mica, Solid Rock Church was supposed to be a sanctuary. Instead, it became the place where her life was redirected, reshaped, and eventually destroyed. Do you believe churches should have strict rules about pastors counseling or hiring young women they once mentored? Comment yes if you agree, or no if you think it's not necessary. Mica's introduction to Solid Rock shows us how abuse of power often begins subtly. A trusted leader blurs boundaries. A young person, eager to serve, is gradually drawn into dependency. And a church, blinded by loyalty to its image, fails to intervene until it's far too late. Her life in the church began with joy, songs, and purpose. But as we'll see in the next act, the same system that should have protected her instead protected her abuser and left her increasingly isolated. By now, the pattern should have been clear. JP's first marriage to Allison ended in scandal. Mica's first marriage to Jeremy collapsed. Both divorces were tied directly to JP's actions. In most churches, such a chain of events would lead to accountability, a public confession, a removal from leadership, a time of repentance and discipline. But at Solid Rock Church, that's not what happened. When the affair between JP and Mica came to light, Solid Rock was faced with defining choice. Will they confront sin openly or protect their pastor's image? Instead of accountability, the church chose containment. Behind closed doors, leaders framed the situation as a family matter. Publicly, they said little. Whispers of scandals circled the pews. But from the pulpit, the message was carefully controlled. JP acknowledged trials, spoke vaguely about God's grace, and then moved forward as if nothing had happened. The congregation was divided. Some members quietly left, refusing to sit under a man they no longer trusted. Others stayed, convinced that forgiveness meant giving JP a second chance. After all, didn't the Bible say, "Touch not my anointed"? That phrase, misused and misunderstood, became a shield, and behind it, JP stood untouchable. For Allison, silence was devastating. She had lost her marriage and, in many ways, her community. Her voice didn't matter. JP's did. For Jeremy, Mica's first husband, the effect was the same. His heartbreak was sidelined, his loss barely acknowledged. The church didn't rally around him. They rallied around the pastor. And in this silence, a dangerous precedent was set. The leader mattered more than the people. Have you ever seen a church protect a leader while ignoring the pain of the members? Type yes in the comments if this reminds you of something you witnessed. When JP remarried, the church didn't resist. They celebrated. Mica, just 23 years old, was ushered into her new role as the pastor's wife. She became the face of women's ministry, a worship leader, and the smiling presence beside her husband. Her youth, her voice, her charisma, it gave the church a fresh glow. But beneath the surface, there was unease. Some members whispered, wasn't this the same young woman who'd been caught with him during his first marriage? Didn't this feel wrong? Those who raised concerns were told to be quiet. Speaking against the pastor was equated with sowing division. Questioning him was attacking the church. And so, once again, silence reigned. As time passed, JP's influence only grew. His sermons grew bolder, his grip on the congregation stronger, and his pattern of behavior, according to those close to Mica, more controlling. The church didn't just allow this. It enabled it. They gave him the pulpit, the microphone, and the unquestioned authority to define truth. When Mica began to show signs of distress, when she tried to leave, when she hinted at abuse, her concerns were brushed aside. Members were reminded that JP was a pastor, that his word should be trusted, that Mica, perhaps, was simply struggling. In reality, Solid Rock had become more than a church. It had become a system of protection, protecting the man at the top, not the people beneath him. Members who left were labeled disloyal. Leaders who disagreed quietly stepped down. And all the while, JP's voice carried unchecked power. This is the danger when churches mistake loyalty to a leader for loyalty to Christ. The system begins to serve the shepherd, not the sheep. Do you think churches should have outside accountability boards to investigate pastors? Comment yes or a no below. By refusing to hold JP accountable, Solid Rock taught a dangerous lesson. Charisma outweighs character. And it was that decision, the choice to protect him instead of confronting him, that set the stage for everything that followed. Mica, once the bright young woman full of dreams, was now trapped in a system that shielded her husband at all costs. She could cry, she could warn, she could even plead for help, but the system wasn't built to protect her. It was built to protect him. When Mica married JP in 2017, many thought her story was a redemption arc. A young woman, forgiven and restored, now stepping into her role as a pastor's wife. But behind the scenes, it was not a love story. It was a story of control, fear, and manipulation. At first, Mica played her role well. She led worship, designed graphics for the church, and threw herself into ministry. She became a stepmother to JP's 5 children. From the outside, it looked like stability, but friends noticed small cracks. She seemed quieter around JP, more cautious, as if she weighed every word before speaking. The dynamic wasn't partnership. It was dominance. By 2023, the marriage was visibly unraveling. Mica confided in her sister Sierra about the abuse she was enduring. She tried to leave multiple times. In January, she even moved to Kansas to stay with family, joining a new church and starting over. For a moment, it seemed like freedom. But then, out of nowhere, she sent her family a puzzling message. She was reconciling with JP, moving back to South Carolina, and praising God for restoring her marriage.
We got all text messages when she was leaving. That didn't make any sense. When she was planning on staying in Kansas and she was planning on thriving, she was planning on making trips, healing, and all of a sudden we heard nothing. It was a, hey, good news. I've been reconciled. My husband's allowing me to come back home. Praise God.
I just want to tell you what a lot of people have told me lately and reminded me, because I think I forgot. I knew, but I pushed it in the back of my head just because of my situation. But you are the bride of Christ before anybody else's bride. God hates divorce, but why? According to everybody I've asked and the scriptures that I've found, it's because it hurts people. But does abuse hurt people? How do you think God feels about that? That I'm God's bride first. And even an earthly spouse, who's a good spouse, when they know that their bride is being hurt, just imagine what an earthly spouse does. What do you think your heavenly spouse does? when you're the bride of Christ and he sees his bride going through abuse and hurt, what do you think he thinks about that?
Her family didn't believe it was her voice speaking. It sounded forced, coerced. Within weeks, she was back under JP's control. The evidence of control piled up. GPS tracking devices. Twice, Mica found trackers on her car. When she reported it, nothing happened. JP insisted it was for her safety. Tire slashing. Twice, her car tires were slashed, conveniently limiting her freedom of movement. Leaked photos. Intimate pictures were posted online. Mica believed JP was behind it, but police said it couldn't be proven. Forced hospitalization. JP allegedly had her committed to a hospital, claiming she had mental illness. He took her keys, wallet, and car, leaving her helpless. Mica told police and friends repeatedly, "I'm being stalked. I'm being controlled. I'm not safe." But each time the system failed her. Mica's social media posts became windows into her suffering.
Hey,
I'll show you the pictures.
do you want to go to jail?
They'll be on Facebook in a few hours.
Alrighty, you'll be in jail in a few hours. Walk away.
Thank you for all your prayers and support. Know that I have to keep my circle really, really small right now. I'm used to having a really big circle, so it's hard because I want to reach out to everybody and tell you how much I love you and I miss you. But this is the best way that I know how, so I love you all. I miss you.
She wrote about abuse, about reconciling faith with the need to leave an unhealthy marriage. In one heartbreaking post, she declared, "I am the bride of Christ before anyone else's bride. God hates divorce because it hurts people. But does abuse not hurt people? Do you think God ignores that?" Those words weren't random. They were confessions. She was fighting for her freedom, not just from a marriage, but from a system that told her she couldn't leave. To her sister, she was more direct. "If I end up with a bullet in my head, it wasn't me. It was JP. It wasn't paranoia. It was fear rooted in experience. She had seen his anger. She had felt his control. She had been trapped before. And as the days ticked down to her final moments, she had finally taken action. Divorce papers were served. For the first time in years, Mica was serious about leaving. If you believe Mica's words should have been enough for authorities to act, type "protect victims" in the comments. This act of Mica's story is not just about a marriage gone wrong. It's about the red flags of abuse, gaslighting, stalking, forced control, spiritual manipulation that too often go ignored. It shows us how abusers use not just physical tactics, but also religion, reputation, and fear to keep their victims trapped. And it reminds us that when victims cry for help, silence in the community can be as dangerous as the abuser himself. April 27th, 2024 was supposed to be a Saturday like any other. But for Mica Miller, she had other plans and one would be her last. That morning, her neighbors and church friends noticed nothing unusual. She had plans. She had just filed divorce papers days earlier. She seemed ready for a new chapter. Her family believed she was finally serious about leaving JP for good. But by afternoon, she would be dead. Her body pulled from the Lumber River State Park in North Carolina. Surveillance footage shows Mica leaving her apartment around 10:13 a.m. She returned briefly, then left again, driving her black Honda Accord. Her first stop, Dick's Pawn Shop in Myrtle Beach. Security cameras captured her walking in alone. Just after noon, she legally purchased a 9mm handgun. The receipt showed it was bought only hours before her death. From there, her phone records revealed an unusual search. National Park near me. Directions led her north toward Lumber River State Park. On the way, she stopped at a gas station. Cameras there caught her buying a drink, again alone. From the outside, it looked like a normal day. But in reality, every step was leading to tragedy.
The address of your emergency.
Hi, are you able to trace the location of my phone?
Let me see. You don't know where you're at?
At National Park. I have my location on, I think, on my phone. Find my phone is on.
I don't think you are in Robeson County. Are you at the Lumber River State Park?
Yeah, that's where I am.
Tell me what's happened.
I just want my family to know where to find me.
At the river that afternoon, a man named Johnny Jacobs was fishing. Around 3 p.m., he heard something chilling.
In there with my little
boat. A
boat.
woman crying. He couldn't see her through
and
the thick
maybe 5
trees,
minutes
but he
after
could
getting
hear the
into the
sobs.
slough, I heard a
They
cry,
lasted a few
a
minutes.
faint cry.
Then
Heard it for
silence.
maybe 2 or 3
Moments.
minutes, and the crying stopped.
Moments later, the unmistakable sound of a gunshot shattered the calm. Johnny froze. Oh my God!
I said,
he
oh
whispered.
my God,
He
don't
prayed
tell
it
me.
wasn't what it
Don't tell
sounded
me,
like.
because the crying had stopped. I said, don't tell me something's happened. Don't tell me something. I was getting ready to get out of there. Another 3 people came into the lake on a boat, and I plainly asked them, I said, did y'all hear that gunshot? They said yes.
Later, he would find a backpack on the riverbank. Inside were glasses, a cell phone, bank cards, keys, a small Bible. All belonged to Mica. An hour and a half
License,
later,
her bank
a
card.
kayaker spotted her body.
She had
in the
her
water.
keys in the bag. She had a little small Bible, all of her credit cards, her bank cards, and a few receipts of some things.
She had been shot once in the head. But the detail that still haunts investigators and family members alike is what happened just before the gunshot. Mica dialed 911. Her voice was calm but heavy. I just want my family to know where to find me, she told the operator. To police, this was proof of suicide. But to her family and friends, it raised more questions than answers. Was she speaking freely, or was someone near her? Some listeners claimed they heard another man's voice faintly in the background. Others believed the call didn't even sound like Mica, suggesting it may have been altered or manipulated. What do you think? Was this the voice of a woman giving up, or a woman being coerced? Let us know in the comments.
A hair appointment this week. She had plans to attend church with them on Sunday. So the news, when I heard it, I thought it was just some kind of terrible misunderstanding. She was headed in a positive direction, and she was making plans and had a new purpose that she was pursuing. She was loving her job, everything. I know she had been struggling. She's gotten 3 different numbers, or she's had 3 different numbers in the last 3 months, trying to make sure that he did not get her phone number and could not get in contact with her. She messaged me saying, thank you for your gentle warnings over the years about JP, or my relationship with JP. I know that you knew I wasn't ready to get out yet. I've replayed our combos over and over in our head throughout the years, and wished there was a way I could get out, and now I have, with a big smile.
Abusive relationship, whether that's sexual, whether that's somebody forcing you to take illegal drugs, or alcohol abuse, or physical abuse, psychological abuse, making you think that this is all your fault, or you're a bad mom, or you're a bad wife, or you're a bad husband, or you're not giving it your all when you know you are.
The next day. It would take about a week before those papers were served to JP. But only 2 days after that, Mica was dead.
JP personally called me and said, hey, Mica bought a gun. She's out in the backyard. Well, you think she bought it to shoot me? I don't know, JP. I don't know what's going on in the house that would be a reason. He was scared, was wondering, do you think she bought it to shoot me? Well, why would that be a question if you wasn't mistreating her?
The greatest wife anyone could ask for. She was incredibly affirming. We spent every night together for hours just talking and talking.
Meanwhile, J.P. Miller had an alibi. He was reportedly in Charleston, attending a sporting event. Multiple witnesses claimed they saw him there. License plate readers even tracked his vehicle traveling the route. But for many, that doesn't erase suspicion. Could someone else have been involved? Could J.P. have orchestrated events from afar? These questions remain unanswered. If Mica's final hours were unsettling, J.P.'s response afterward was chilling. Less than 24 hours after her body was discovered, he stood before his congregation and made the announcement. There were no tears, no shock, no hesitation. Instead, he calmly declared that her death was self-induced. He added that she was well mentally and urged the church to keep giving and serving while he took a short break.
Do an altar call today. Instead, I'm going to have you stand up and I'm going to make an announcement. And after the announcement, I'm going to ask that you leave church quietly and don't talk about the announcement here in the building, please, if you can, so y'all can stand to your feet. Before I make the announcement, I also want to say that my request to you is that you will continue to come to church and serve and give for the next, little bit, because I don't want to I'm taking a little bit of a break, and I don't want to have to worry about the church. My break may be a few days, a few weeks, I don't know. I got a call late last night. My wife has passed away. And it was self-induced, and it was up in North Carolina. And we're going to have a funeral for her next Sunday here at 3 p.m. And so it's all I can, I'm just kind of going on adrenaline right now. So y'all pray for me and my kids and everybody. And y'all knew that she wasn't well mentally, and that she needed her medicine that was hard to get to her. And so I'm sure there'll be more details to come, but just keep our family in your prayers. And I'm going to let Pastor Randall, my bishop, he can pray. I'll give him a microphone, he'll pray out. And if you have anything you want to share as well, I appreciate it.
To Mica's grieving family, it felt like a slap in the face. The coroner hadn't even released an official ruling yet, and already JP had decided the narrative. What do you think of his reaction? Does it sound like grief or a rehearsed statement? Drop your opinion below. Her family refuses to believe it was suicide. They point to her recent divorce filing, her plans, her upbeat conversations. They point to her own words. If I end up with a bullet in my head, it wasn't me, it was JP. Even more troubling, JP pushed for her immediate cremation, denying the family's request for a second autopsy. Critical evidence, they believe, was lost forever. And then there are the haunting coincidences. Just years earlier, another man connected to JP's alleged affair partner had died in a suspicious drowning. Once again, no charges, no accountability. To
mounds of paperwork that I have is incredible. She collected a lot of things. She kept a notebook. I have boxes of journals, which, by the way, he's made 100 phone calls looking for, as I understand. And he is constantly trying to stay in front of this, spin some, web some story. And
I can't even, if I had 10 hours a day, that wouldn't be enough time to tell you all the great things about her and what it was like to be in an intimate relationship with her. You know, I still can hear her voice, and I can still picture her just walking in the front door. And she was a great stepmom. In fact, she did so much work with the kids all the time. She was the one that would always help pick them up from school and get their food. And she'd take Salem, my daughter, all the time to get their nails done or to go to Lululemon or all these special girly things, you know. And I appreciated that from the very beginning. Not once did she ever complain about me having 5 kids. And this was my favorite parody that she did.
Give me life, take me for what I am.
Imagine being married to that. It was like that in our house all the time. Y'all stand your feet, and Pastor Randall's going to close in prayer.
Whoa. That truck is tinted black. How do I know who's in it? And also, how do I know he was at an athletic event? And was he there the whole time? And how far away is that event from where Mica was killed?
I felt like I had come across the answer of maybe why she would have taken it this far. And that is, he had her convinced that this was what she should do. In my opinion, I believe he had her convinced that it would be the only way that she could escape him to some degree. I believe that he used every tactic and tool that he could.
I believe that it was all staged. I believe that the whole thing was premeditated. I believe that the narrative was established by Junior all the way through. Before there was a release, like the day we were notified, he was already saying, she did it. Why would you do that if you don't have all the information yet? Why would you not be grieving and just, you know, he has not shown any remorse, no grief. He shows nervousness. He shows guilt. He shows, you know, that he is hiding something.
Hey everybody, I just wanted to share the chorus of a song that came to my head the other day. I was just kind of battling thoughts of just kind of like human thoughts, you know, things that you want to do. And it's just a fleeting thought, you know. And then this song came to my mind because it says, you know, bless those who curse you, pray for your enemies. Pray miracles over your life in Jesus' name, in Jesus.
Mica's loved ones, the pattern is undeniable. To law enforcement, the evidence was inconclusive. The official report closed her case as a suicide. But for the community, the case is anything but closed. Online forums, church members, and independent investigators continue to question every detail. The missing toxicology, the faint background voice, the church's refusal to confront JP, and his disturbing calmness after her death. This is where Mica's story transforms from a private tragedy into a public warning. Because whether her death was suicide, murder, or something between, the signs of abuse were there all along. And the people around her, family, police, church members, were too often silenced, ignored, or powerless. The final hours of Mica Miller's life remind us that sometimes the most dangerous place for a victim is not the world outside, but the home and the community that refuses to see. They remind us that when red flags are ignored, lives are lost. And they remind us that accountability, true accountability, must start with leaders who are willing to put truth above image, no matter how painful it may be. The story of Mica Miller is more than a tragic headline. It is more than a case file, more than a mystery of suicide or murder. It is a mirror held up to the church, to leaders, and to every Christian who dares to look closely. Because whether Mica pulled that trigger herself, or whether she was pushed by the weight of control, manipulation, and fear, her story screams one undeniable truth. Silence kills. At Solid Rock Church, silence reigned. When JP's first marriage collapsed, silence. When the affair with Mica became public, silence. When she cried for help, through police reports, social posts, even her own sister, too often, silence. And that silence was not neutral. It was a shield that protected the man in power, not the woman in pain. Church leaders must understand. Forgiveness does not mean ignoring consequences. Grace does not mean covering up abuse. When image becomes more important than integrity, when protecting the pulpit outweighs protecting the people, the church ceases to look like Christ and begins to look like a cult of personality. Do you believe churches today are too quick to protect their leaders instead of their members? Comment yes or a no below. And for believers, Mica's words must echo in our hearts. I am the bride of Christ first. Those words matter. They remind us that no earthly marriage, no spiritual leader, no church system has a right to demand your silence in the face of abuse. You belong to Christ first, and he does not call his bride to suffer quietly in the shadows. If you see the signs, stalking, control, manipulation, spiritual abuse, do not dismiss them. Speak up. Protect the vulnerable. Break the silence before silence breaks another life. If you believe Mica's story should be taught in every church as a warning, type "Remember Mica" in the comments. Mica Miller's case may be closed in the eyes of the law, but for her family, her friends, and now for all of us, it remains a haunting open question. What really happened on the banks of that river? We may never know. But here's what we do know. A system of silence and misplaced loyalty helped put her there. So let Mica's voice, though silence in life, speak loudly now. Let her story call the church back to truth, to accountability, to protection for the vulnerable. If this story shook you, don't let it end here. Backhand Index Pointing Right share this video so Mica's story is never forgotten. Backhand Index Pointing Right subscribe to Silent Witness for more true stories that expose hidden darkness. And in the comments, tell us, what lesson do you believe the modern church must learn from Mica's life and death? Because in the end, justice is not just what happens in the courtroom. Justice is what we choose to do with the truth.
Want to support us and appreciate our craft? Click like, comment, and hit the subscribe button now.